So we have yet another edition of Confused Americans in Europe, otherwise known as American living vicariously through other Americans as they travel through Europe. So without further ado, let's get into this first video. Things Germans do that would put Americans in a coma.
Things Germans do that would put Americans in a coma while I make coffee. So, first of all, Americans would not be able to handle all the recycling waste separation that Germans do. Americans are way too lazy or whatever to take the time to separate waste like that.
I wouldn't even say lazy, I think selfish is maybe the better word. And sometimes the selfishness masquerades as laziness, but when you think about the fact that Americans are working so many hours, I don't think it's just intrinsic laziness. I think it's more of that individualistic mentality where people sort of detach the consequences of their actions from the actions themselves. So in other words, they see their lack of recycling or their lack of environmentalism, so to speak, and they completely disconnect that from the overall ramifications of their behavioral patterns. And as a result, you get global warming.
Guarantee you that. Walking everywhere? No. That would not fly in the US. Americans would definitely not be up for that. Okay.
So that's an interesting one because, again, that's kind of assuming that Americans are just intrinsically lazy, which I actually disagree with. Because when you go to New York City, for example, you will see many Americans walking. I think it's more that the cities in the US are simply not designed for people to walk. You don't have a lot of comfortable sidewalks. You may have sidewalks in the cities, but they're not necessarily comfortable to be on. And even if they are, the people that you encounter on those sidewalks may not be comfortable to be around. And when I think about the US, the best way I could explain it, especially if you're a foreigner who's never been there and don't really understand the nuances of America's issues, is the US is like when you have some earbuds and you put them in your pocket and you pull them out an hour later and they're all tangled up. And you're trying to figure out how to untangle it, but every time you pull on the cord, you just tighten the knot. And I feel like that's how the US is, because you can make cities more walkable, but then people are going to be more vulnerable to gun violence because they're out and about and they're in a more dense environment. So you have to solve the gun issue. And of course, that brings a whole host of other issues along with it. I just think that the US needs a complete overhaul. I know I'm getting a lot deeper than she was probably anticipating people getting with this video, but that's the truth, is that every surface level issue that you see in the US has an underlying mechanism that essentially supports it.
Another thing is the fact that most Germans go to the store a few times a week for their groceries because they have smaller fridges. I don't think Americans could handle that. You know, Americans like to go do one huge trip for the whole week and fill their giant refrigerators with so much food. If you guys could see the size of my parents' refrigerator and there's only 3 of them living in the house, you would not believe it.
So again, this kind of just goes back to this idea that Americans are intrinsically lazy and only want to go grocery shopping once a week. I used to be like that as well, but it's more that most Americans don't live in very close proximity to a grocery store. In fact, there are places known as food deserts in the US where people might be up to 30 minutes or an hour even from the nearest grocery store. Maybe you have a convenience store, but in terms of getting fresh produce and things of that nature, it's going to be very difficult. Or maybe you only have access to grocery stores with lower quality produce. I think really what this comes down to, again, is just urban planning. It's structuring places such that Americans are all within walking distance of a grocery store. And I can attest to this because I'm an American. I don't like grocery shopping. It's one of my least favorite adulting activities to partake in. But where we are right now, we're in Vietnam, my girlfriend and I. And I don't know if you can tell, but we're in a high-rise apartment. And basically the way this whole apartment structure is situated is we have at least 3 grocery stores, I guess more so convenience stores, but convenience stores with fresh produce literally on the first floor of this building. So all within walking distance. We're talking a 2-minute walk, and most of that is just in the elevator. So because of that, I'm comfortable going to the grocery store pretty much every day, because I mean, it only takes 5 or 6 minutes to go and get whatever we need for the day, purchase it. It's not going to cost any extra money. But I also think that a lot of Americans are incentivized to purchase in bulk because things tend to come in larger quantities. And of course, I've touched in the past on how having larger quantities can be indicative of a quality issue, because I don't know if you saw that lightning in the background, but it's coming down outside. But the fact that you can get, let's say, for example, 2 full loaves of bread means that the bread must be lower quality, because how else would it stay good enough for you to eat all of that bread within a reasonable time frame?
Then how about taking a year or more off of work for parental leave when you have a baby? Already, a lot of my friends at home can't believe that I will not be working for a year after we have our baby. Okay,
So that's something I don't know too much about, because I've never really worked in a corporate environment with a salaried position before. What I want to know is, what are the parental leave laws like where you are? Because I know that even throughout Europe, it tends to vary pretty drastically. I've heard that Switzerland tends to have slightly weaker parental leave laws compared to, let's say, for example, Norway or Sweden or the Netherlands, so on and so forth. So let me know in the comments what country you're from and what the parental leave laws are like where you're at.
last, I will say the fact that Germans don't commonly go or even have drive-through foods, fast drive-through coffee, whatever. The fact that they're just not using drive-through fast food that often. Americans could never. I mean, when I lived in the US, I didn't eat fast food that often, but like drive-through for my morning coffee, that was part of my morning commute. You know, Americans love quick and efficient. Doesn't necessarily matter about quality.
So the thing is, I don't even think drive-thrus are necessarily any quicker or more efficient than just walking into a place and getting your stuff, especially if you can call an order ahead of time, or maybe if you go there so much that they already have your order ready and then you just go in, collect it, and pay, or something like that. But I think it's more that, again, the urban planning just incentivizes drive-through restaurants, drive-through fast food spots, so on and so forth. And fun fact, in the US, we actually have drive-through pharmacies. That was something that my girlfriend did not expect to see when she came to the US for the first time, was seeing a CVS pharmacy with a drive-through. She was like, "You can just drive through and get your drugs?" And I was like, "Yeah, pretty much." And also, we have drive-through banks where you pull into this little side area of the bank, and then this little tube comes down. I don't really know how it works because I've never used one, but I remember when I was a kid, I used to think it was super, super cool. But yeah, again, I don't think it's any more convenient to just be in your car. And when you think about, again, the environmental implications of that at scale, and the amount of traffic that it creates, that everyone is relying on a car for transit, I think actually it's less convenient at the macro scale. On to the next video. Can someone please tell me why schools in Europe have no security? Okay, so this is in the Netherlands. I know this because the person who posted this, their name is Expat in Amsterdam. So they are in Amsterdam, the Netherlands. I lived in the Netherlands for 14 months. And this was actually one of the biggest culture shocks that I personally had, was realizing how open the campuses were. I understand maybe for 16 and up, but we're talking elementary school children where maybe I'd be going for a run in the middle of the day because, look, I'm self-employed. My schedule is pretty much completely determined by me. So if I want to go for a run at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, I can do that. So sometimes I would do that, and I would literally run past a school playground and there would be kids playing on the playground at recess, and they would be saying stuff to me, saying hi, things like that. And it was so confusing to me because in the US, you will pretty much never see that, even in good areas. Even in the good areas where I grew up in, I would say, a middle to almost upper middle class community in the US. And the elementary school that I went to, in fact, all the elementary schools I went to, but the one I went to for the longest especially, had a fence all the way around the playground. And the way the fence was structured was they had the chain link fence, and then they had these brick pillars like this with these big black metal bar fence structure things in between the pillars. But there were these gaps in between the brick pillars and the metal bar structures. And I remember hearing stories when I was at that school that there had been other kids who had slipped in between those gaps and just escaped. Now, when I think about the quote unquote lack of security at Dutch schools, and I'm gonna drive this point home in a second, don't worry. But when I think about that, when I saw that for the first time in the Netherlands, my first thought was, how do they keep the kids from just going home? Because I know that that would not work in the US, not even just because of the mass shootings and things like that. Because let's be real, a chain link fence is not going to prevent someone with an AR-15 from walking into a school and shooting it up. There's almost no security measure that you can implement to prevent school shootings from happening. I remember in high school, I know I'm going on a tangent here, but in high school, we had to wear these student IDs to indicate that we were actually students at that high school. And I always used to think, that is so incredibly dumb because they're not actually looking at your IDs. So if you got an ID from someone who looked even remotely similar to you, then nobody's gonna check it. Nobody's gonna check and see if you're actually the person. They just wanna see that you have an ID on. So I used to think, well, somebody from another school could just steal an ID or borrow an ID from a student who does go to this school, and then they can put the gun in their backpack, they can come to the school, wait until passing period in between classes or lunch when everyone is out and about, and they can start a school shooting. I mean, I don't know. I just thought it was so incredibly dumb. And then on top of that, if you forgot your ID, you had to pay for a temporary one. Different discussion for a different day. But my point is, mass shootings are not necessarily the main thing I was thinking about. I was more so thinking about the fact that kids could just leave. And what I want to know is, how do they prevent kids from doing that? I understand that parenting is a big part of that, but at the same time, some kids are just devious. And I think everyone knows at least one or two kids, whether it's the kids of their friends or kids that they knew growing up, that were just always pushing the limits of the law. So let me know how they handle that where you live, and let me know what country you live in once again in the comments. On to the next video. More culture shocks I had when I moved to Spain from the US. And this one is muted for copyright purposes. Hey, do you want to grab some breakfast on the way? Oh no, I'm good. I grabbed a granola bar and a coffee, so I'll just eat on the way. You're gonna eat on the way while walking? Yeah, I eat on the go all the time, don't you? No. Oh. Yeah, so I think that, from what I've gathered at least, that's more of a, I guess, Southern European thing. I don't think France is really considered to be in Southern Europe, but I know France, Spain, and more of the warm climate countries tend to be like that. In my experience in the Netherlands, it wasn't completely out of the ordinary to eat while walking. I definitely saw people doing it pretty much just as frequently as I would see in the US, especially kids, because you know kids are always on the move. They might go to the store because the stores are actually within walking distance and they can access them safely. They might go to the store, grab some food, and then they just walk with their friends and eat. I don't think that's completely abnormal, but from what I've gathered, Spain, France, Italy, etc., and let me know if there are any other countries that fit into this group, they have a slower pace of life overall than maybe the more Germanic countries in Europe. Let me know if I'm misinterpreting this though, because of course this is all on a case-by-case basis, but I remember my French teacher in high school told us that it is completely abnormal to walk while eating, to drive while eating, and to eat really, really fast. People in France and evidently people in Spain like to take their time. Hey, I think the delivery guy is here with the pizza. Let me go get it. Great. What's wrong? I think they forgot to cut the pizza into slices. It's pretty standard for the pizza to come uncut. Wait. So that's definitely another difference between Spain and the Netherlands. Because when we ordered pizza in the Netherlands, it always came cut. Or maybe it depends on where you ordered the pizza from. We always ordered from New York Pizza because they have this amazing vegan shawarma pizza. And I miss it every single day. But it kind of does make more sense for it to not come cut if you think about it, because they don't know how many people are there and how many slices each person is going to want or how big they want the slices to be. So it does make more sense. Or maybe there should be an option where you can have it pre-sliced or not. But that's interesting. I never thought about that. This is why I like reacting to these videos, because I never would have thought about that. I need to find a restroom ASAP. Okay, I think I saw one back that way. Do you have money? Oh no. Great. Money for what? The restroom. You have to pay to use a public restroom? Yeah, sometimes. Yeah, I wouldn't even say sometimes. In my experience, pretty much all of the public restrooms were paid restrooms. And the reason why this is the case, if you're an American watching this, is because restrooms are generally not profitable. The only reason why you don't have to pay for restrooms in the US is because they literally outlawed it. But rest assured that if it wasn't against the law, Americans would be taxing for the restrooms. Generally, the restroom prices, at least in the Netherlands, are around 90 cents. They were 75 cents when I first moved there, but I guess inflation or something, I don't know. But in the train stations, they were around 90 cents by the time we left, which is not that bad. I mean, if you use a public restroom twice a day and you go out maybe, I don't know, twice a week, that's not really significant. That's what, €3.60 per week. That's not significant at all. And it's a worthwhile investment because they do have staff on site to pretty much constantly keep the restrooms clean. So you do get what you pay for. But I'm not gonna lie, when I really, really have to use the restroom and I'm sitting there fumbling with my card trying to pay for the thing and it's taking a while to process, it can be a little frustrating. And if you're watching this and you're from Europe, maybe you've been in a similar situation where you're trying to get your card out your wallet and you're holding it up to the thing, but it's not reading it. And the ones in the Netherlands take around 5 seconds, I think, to read. Every second counts when you have to pee, because if you can't tell, I drink a lot of water. But all in all, it's not really that big of a deal. It's not as big of a deal as most Americans in Europe make it seem like, but it's definitely a very, very pronounced difference.